My name is Pat Gillette. I am a partner at a law firm called Orr, Carrington & Sutcliffe in San Francisco. I do employment litigation. I primarily do jury trials, so I love talking to audiences, only if you vote for me at the end. And I also founded something called the Opt-in Project, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. But I want to start by first welcoming everybody. It's so nice to see a room filled with so many people from different walks of life, from different ethnicities, from different genders, in different age groups, some students, some alumni, some parents, some staff people. And we welcome you tonight and hope that this will be a really invigorating evening of discussion and of new ideas that are out of the box. That's our goal today, is to start thinking out of the box. So I'm going to start off by asking you a question. Who out there is watching Mad Men? Okay, now, those of you who are not watching Mad Men, I can't even believe it. You need to get a life. This is really important. Mad Men is probably the best series on TV. Am I right? Come on. Won an Emmy Award, and Don Draper, the main star, oh my God, so handsome and wonderful. For those of you who don't know, Mad Men is about admin on Madison Avenue in the 1960s. And the two main characters are a guy named Don Draper and his wife, Bets. Now, what you need to know about Mad Men is the following. Here's what happens. Don Draper goes to work, and Bets stays home. Don Draper arrives home from work, and Bets has dinner on the table with pearls, waiting for him, either with the kids or hot for him in the oven as he gets home from his long day at work. Don Draper goes out and entertains clients. Bets reads stories to the kids at home as they go to bed. And Don Draper takes care of himself, while Bets takes care of everything else. What is that? What is that? That's the 1950s, 1960s family model. That's the model that was in place when I grew up. My dad got home from work at 5 o'clock. We ate at 5:30. He put his hat down, went to the bathroom, sat down at the table, we had dinner. We had to straighten up the house before he got home to make sure everything looked right for him when he got home. And not because he was a tyrant, he was a really wonderful man. But that's the way it went. That's the world that Don Draper and Bets live in. And that's the world of the 1950s and 60s. That's changed a little bit, hasn't it? Because now what do we have? We have dual career families. We have women who have jobs and we have men who have jobs. We have global customer bases where nobody gets home from work at a certain time because BlackBerries allow us to work 24/7. And the cost of living is not what it was in Don Draper's day when he could buy a Cadillac for $6,500 with those huge fins on the back or go to a fancy dinner for less than $100. The cost of living now prevents most people from not having two people working. And so the family model that Don Draper had and that Bets have in Mad Men has done a 180. It's changed completely. But what hasn't changed? What hasn't changed? The workplace, right? The workplace is the same workplace with the same rules, with the same expectations for most industries as it was in the 1950s and 60s. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, is how the workplace is going to have to change. Now, you know, if you mention change, it's definitely the word of the hour. Politicians talk about it. Wall Street has been through just a few changes. And companies like to talk about how they're changing. But are things really going to change? For those of you who went to Oxy as I did, what you know is McKelvey told us in political science, the more you change, the more you remain the same. And I think that's true for the most part. But what we're seeing in the workplace today is that change is actually taking hold. And there's a reason for that. The reason is this. We're living in quite a fascinating time where we have Gen Yers, or the millenniums, coming into the workplace. And what are they looking for? Well, We know they want interesting and challenging work. That's really important to Gen Yers. We know that they will trade money for time. We know that they're concerned about social issues and about their communities. We know that they're idealistic and risk adverse. And we know that they want to be involved in their family lives, whether that's a traditional family or a non-traditional family, whether that means they're married or they want to just have a great single life. Then we have another group of people in the workplace, the Gen Yers coming in and the baby boomers not going out, especially after what happened in Wall Street. And so the baby boomers, what do we know about them? They want interesting and challenging work. That's what they've had all their lives. They'll trade money for time. They're concerned about social issues and about community. They're idealistic and risk adverse. And they want to be connected to their children and to their grandchildren. And so we see this interesting phenomena in the workplace of what we call bookends. The Gen Yers coming in and saying the workplace has to change to meet their needs, and the baby boomers not leaving and saying the workplace has to change to meet their needs. And as a result, we're beginning to see real change. There are some companies that are really leading the way in this change. Best Buy is one of the leaders in the field. They've done tremendous things with their workplace. Deloitte, one of the leaders, thought leaders in how you can rethink the way the workplace is structured. Talking about career lattices instead of career ladders. Changing the way we think about careers. Changing the relationship between employer and employee. Changing the workplace. And so we see changes in the traditional workday. We see people thinking about a workday differently. In part to accommodate the global needs, in part to accommodate the fact that people don't want to be at their desk 24/7. We see changes in the traditional structure of careers, that you don't necessarily have to go straight up, that you can go over and up and over and up. We see changes in the way we reward success, that we measure success by different things other than a paycheck, including commitment to community and including commitment to family. There are more CEOs who talk about the fact that they're going to a soccer game for their kid that they never would have said before. As I joked with people earlier today, I took my kids to swimming lessons one summer, every day, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 o'clock. I told my partners I had an appointment. So, as I said earlier today, they thought I was seeing a shrink, I'm sure. So, of course, they didn't question me. But that's how I changed my workday. We're seeing that now said out loud, where people are saying, I'm going to leave work early today to go for this particular event for my kid or my spouse or my partner. And we're seeing changes to the 1950s work structure. I founded a project called the Opt-in Project. The purpose of the project, well, it was actually a diversion from doing law for a while, but the purpose of the project was to find ways that law firms could restructure the way they think about their organization. Because law firms are the last bastion of traditional 1950s culture, let me tell you. They don't change unless they're forced to change. And so we went out and surveyed other industries and had meetings just like the one we're having tonight, where we took people from all different walks of life and brought them in to one place and said, share with us your ideas, your thoughts, what your company's doing, what your experience tells you needs to be done, or what you'd like to have done. We took all that information, we put it into a report, we published it, and we shook up the law firm industry for a while because we said things that had never been said before. We said, we don't want to talk about part-time. This is not a women's issue. This is about fundamental change in the workplace, fundamental ways that we can rethink the way work gets done so that people can have some sort of balance. I don't actually like to talk about work-life balance because that assumes that work and life are two different things. They're one thing. Work is part of your life, and if you enjoy what you're doing, it's a good part of your life. And the more flexibility you build into the workplace, the more trust and loyalty you build in the workplace, the happier most people are. So tonight, we're going to ask you to expand this discussion to the people in this room about how we can change the workplace. what we can do and how we can build on your experiences and your knowledge to make a difference in the workplaces that all of us are in or will be in. The workplaces that people may have left and want to come back to, the workplaces that people are going to enter into, the workplaces that some of us are in right now. We're first going to hear from Pat, and I'll introduce her in a minute. But when she's finished her remarks, the game changes, and you become the experts. So she's going to give you some inspirational thoughts, some ideas that you're going to be able to percolate and think about. And then we're going to turn to you, and we'll explain this in a little more detail before we break up into these groups. We're going to turn to you and ask for you to share your ideas of what we can do to change the traditional work structure. We have a whole bunch of different industries represented tonight, which is really wonderful. We have a whole bunch of wonderful alumni and students and staff people who have helped put this program together and who are seated at your tables with you. And we have a whole lot of wonderful people in this room who have lots of ideas to share. You may not think it, but as the night progresses, I guarantee you that you'll become more interested and spurred on to think about new ways that are different from the traditional ways of thinking about work. So, let me start by introducing Pat Sueltz. She told me it's like results or insults. Pat is the president and CEO of LogLogic. She joined them in 2007 after serving as CEO of Surf Control. It sounds like something at the beach to me, but I'm sure it's not. Prior to that, she held several high-level positions with Sun Microsystems, IBM, Internet Software. She's a board member of Delphi Systems and Amgen, as well as the American Foundation for the Blind. She graduated from Oxy in 1975, and apparently at one point she and I took a road trip up to Northern California together, which I don't remember because I'm old. And she did graduate work as a Rockefeller Foundation Fellow at the School of Theology in Claremont. So it's my pleasure to introduce Pat, who's going to share some of her thoughts. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Pat. And I just wanted to tell you, I don't recognize the show Mad Men.
Because you're not home enough.
Well, I'm not, but I do recognize the show Weeds, which I thought was very representative of some different out-of-the-box thinking that has a moral at the end also. By all rights, I shouldn't be standing here tonight giving this talk. And the reason is because I was a Korean War baby who was found in an orphanage and adopted by some great people, but who were bumpkins. No one had ever gone to college. My dad went to high school. My mother went through 8th grade. She had gotten married, get ready for this, everyone, 13, had a baby by a first marriage by the time she was like 14. And I said, "How did you get married, Mom?" And she said, "Because I was tall." Anyway, so I just see what I was telling you about being tall. Anyway, what I just want to share is that there was no way that I was going to go to college. And a lot of this starts with education, and it picks up here at Occidental. I graduated in 75, which for those of you who are taking math, you know that is 38 years ago or whatever it is, 33. And I can't even remember now. I've lost my train of thought. But I do want to tell you that it comes through a lot of folks who opted in, who stretched the boundaries of imagination, from my imagination, and thought differently. And you know why someone was telling me they majored in physics. Was it you, Octavio? Physics? Now in media? Well, the reason that Einstein was different, he was a genius. They are still examining his brain. But the reason that he was genius, too, is that he stood outside of where things were happening and how they were defined, and he looked at it differently. And that's what, I don't know what generation we're on. I am a boomer right in the thick of it. But whatever generation we are, we have a lot of ideas that we can share. And it's by those folks and by stretching the imagination through educators, through the folks I met here at Oxy, and people I've met in the workplace that's made a huge difference towards letting us get to that glass ceiling and break through. I'm not here just to talk about women, by the way, because most of my life is spent with men. So let's see if we can get this guy on again. Okay, I have this working perfectly. It's always a... God dang. Okay, So I'm now going to do something like, advance the slide, please. It's a voice-driven command. So I'm here to talk about dreaming big. And if you go to the first slide just by hitting the forward key or enter, or can you hit the, there you go. Okay, well we have a little thing, but you can read this. So when I was in 8th grade, thinking that maybe I could go to Riverside City College. There's nothing wrong with a community college, by the way. But that was the place that I was destined to go, if I was going to go anywhere. Because my father, at the time that I came to school, the tuition was $5,000 a year. And my father made maybe $8,000 a year for a family of 5. So I just want to tell you that in relative terms, think about that with what your parents are doing and those types of opportunities. So I'm in 8th grade, and there is a woman who takes interest in me because you always do the battery of tests. She calls me to her office, and she's kind of doing the counseling. You know how these things are. And she says that I can go to Stanford. And I was too embarrassed to tell her I didn't know where it was or what it was. I mean, I knew it was a college and stuff, but kind of thought it was East Coast or something. And she said, you know, you can do this, and I'm going to help you. And what you have to do is know what to take. And you know, she really got me started. And that's really what I want you to think about as you think about this opting in and the workplace. So dreaming big made a difference. I did take that coursework. I did do some things that she had suggested. And I did get into Stanford University. And I did get into Pomona College, and you guys will recognize this. And I noticed that all the colleges that I got into and rejected had these huge towers. We won't talk about that now, but I'm sure there's something there. And I chose to come to Oxy. And I just found out when I was talking earlier, we used to call, I lived in Belle Young. And who lives in Belle Young? All right, well, we used to call it, with great apologies to the folks who contributed to it, Belle Dung. And then while I was here tonight, I heard that in the 80s they called it Well Hung. So whatever you think, and now it's air conditioning, it's just such a different place. But having come here, what I found was, I found some folks who you don't know now, but Brigitte Knauer, who was pretty wild, and as a associate dean of students who dreamed big with all of us, and Jane Jaquette, who I think just retired, some of you guys may know, and Elizabeth Cease, and Frank Jocelyn, who taught religious studies. And all these things led me to doing things that were different, to getting into running a project for children in Boyle Heights with every Saturday. It was wild. Thank God there was a child who died a week after we had him. He had asthma. You don't know about those things until you're there, and we were 20 years old. And very sadly, he died, and he had severe asthma attack. So we were very lucky, all of us. But with sheer enthusiasm and folks thinking about how we could get the Red Cross to give us station wagons, how we could get the Oxy student body to give us Bengal buses, and how we could get the American Red Cross to give us a place to meet and some money. Now, the way we did that was by lying, because what we did was we put the header on our paper. This is back when you used typewriters and carbon paper. And we just changed the name. We went Project Link, a Red Cross Project Link, an Occidental College project, Project Link, the Methodist Church project. And it worked until we won a nice award from LA, and then everybody showed up. But you know, folks like Brig would tell us to, now I don't know if she'd say think out of the box, but say, you know, go do it. Don't do something illegal. Don't do something that'll get you in trouble, but take a chance on this. I went to seminary after that because Frank Jocelyn, who was a religious studies professor, I didn't want to go to law school. I'd gotten to the point and I didn't know what I was going to do, and he and I were talking about a lot of things, and he convinced me I could go and that there was a fellowship that I could win, all expenses paid. And it worked. So I went to Claremont and didn't find the answers necessarily, but I found certainly better questions to ask. What I would tell you, whatever you do, and why am I? So I said I shouldn't be here. Yes, I should. You know, that's I have that prerogative. But no, I shouldn't from roots, nor by what I studied. I studied political science, and I took a lot of German. And what am I doing in the tech industry and leading security companies and all? Well, you know, I have to tell you, there are a lot of folks who made this happen, and it's because as you're looking into opting in, make sure as you take advice, whether it is someone that you really think is completely full-blown whacked out, listen to them. There are people up here that are famous and people who aren't famous up there. And I've had the privilege of working with all of them. And unfortunately, because I couldn't get into the Oxypedia, I couldn't pull up pictures of some of my beloved professors. But I will just tell you that from Margaret Chase Smith, who some of you remember from history and taking on the communist threat, you know, when we were saying everybody was a threat as a socialist or a communist, she's the one that took on Joe McCarthy for leading that. And she did it while she sponsored a bill for me to enter the U.S. Not because my dad was famous, because he wrote to his U.S. senator and asked her for help. And so I got a nice Senate bill after it, and they let alien children, because at the time, Japanese American children were not exactly, welcome in this country after a major war. So she helped, and I actually got to meet her later. Gil Oman, who has run University of Michigan, helped of their hospital, because I met him on a board, and what a fantastic man and mind he is. Lou Gerstner helped. Do you know how he helped? Now, I don't know if you've read some of his books or heard about this. He will go down as one of the scions of the 20th century for what he did in changing IBM completely over and making that elephant dance. But what he did was a fantastic thing. He took me on as his first technical assistant, and he kept saying, "And you're not even you're not an engineer. You're not even a math major. Why would I hire you?" And so, crazy man that he is, he did. And sometime later, we were working on a project, and this is kind of cool. We were flying back from New York City on a helicopter. You know, it's too cool to be alive. And he said, "Say, so-and-so," one of the people I had worked for in IBM, says, I put together a deal with AT&T. He goes, says, "You're really a good girl." And I went, "Oh, God." And he said, I told him that he was full of, and I said, I can't comprehend what he's saying. And he said, "You're not a girl, you're one of my best executives." And can I tell you how that changes things for you being flexible? And there's a guy that's not on there. When I had a child, we didn't have flexible work programs at IBM. We had it that if you weren't there and you were there late by 5 minutes, that you began to build up a discipline problem. It was a very different time. And I had a boss who said, "You've had this baby, and I know you're nursing, and you can come in early, and you can go home early, because that will help with your schedule." And I said, "That is great." So people that I've worked with have broken the rules. Not legal, moral, ethical rules, but they've broken the rules to allow me to opt in. And I believe that they didn't do it because of me. They would have done it for any of us. Any of you who would ask for that. At the time, I just want to tell you, Kathy Selleck, many of you know, who is a graduate of Oxy and was a very well-known IBM executive. Those were the folks who led the stage for me. I am one of the lucky ones, because at the age that Kathy Selleck and the woman in the bottom right-hand corner, Ellen Hancock, if you became pregnant, you had to, they noticed that you were pregnant, you had to stop working immediately. So it was kept like a secret. Let me just tell you, that's the 1960s. That is not very long ago, and it's up to the early mid-70s. It's not very long ago, guys. And so just think about what these folks had to do. They opted in, some of them by when they did become executives, by being much more flexible on what they did. And not just for women, but for men. So when I say dream big, I'm talking to all of us who start out with whatever speed bumps we have in the way or whatever challenges to think beyond that. I want to talk about Scott McNealy, who's known as, he's the chairman of Sun, but he was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems. And I've had the pleasure of working directly for all these guys. Ed Zander at the bottom, he's a complete wild man. Worked with Roger Penske on a board. And he's a guy that talked about how when you're doing, I learned something about how I had to do the race. Because when he's calling a race and he wins a lot, I didn't realize that when he's on the headset, that everybody else who's racing can hear what he's saying, that's the rules. And I said, well, how do you have the secret sauce, where you're going to pass or do something? He said, well, we do some cool tricks once, and one time he said, so you got to be aware, it's not illegal, do you see what I'm saying? But he's giving an option to his drivers to win. They knew that it was going to change, the weather was going to change, and so he held his guys back, and everybody was trying in the certain weather pattern, and then he put his guys out there when it changed, and they got the lead spot. But everybody can hear what's happening, and I said, so how does that work? Because isn't that the way we all work when we're in a work environment or in a school environment? Everybody knows what you're doing, so you can't, unless you're extremely cunning, it's just not going to happen the way you might think, or you might be fearful. He said you have to think it through, and you have to figure out your strategy and then go for it. And you can win that way, even if you're being deceptive as you're here, just not being limited in what you're saying, and saying more about it because everybody's listening. But the guy at the top, Scott McNealy, had a great thing for me. I'd gone to work, I left Sun, and had an opportunity to go to work for a little company that was really making a lot of progress, Salesforce.com. And I was the president and the COO. And I had been promised, this is another whole story, but I'll tell you about the great lies recruiters tell you when they're trying to recruit you. But the founder at 39 was going to hang up his keyboard in just a few months, and he was going to become retired, and I was the guy. Well, after I'd been there a few months, I realized that wasn't going to happen, and that I wasn't going to be happy when he was running the show. I could be wealthy, but I wasn't going to be happy. And I had a friend who said, I am less empowered than I was as a first-line manager at IBM. And I said, yeah, man. And he goes, but I'm worth $25 million. And I went, whoa. And I learned something about myself in that.